right, welcome to Touchdown Talks. I'm Spencer Taylor. This is my reaction to Week 4 of the NFL action that we just wrapped up. Monday night is when I'm recording this. This will be coming out Tuesday. So yeah, going to get right into it. Before I do go any further, hit subscribe, leave a like rating on this video, and comment down below your thoughts about Week 4. Doing all that helps me out a ton. Also more importantly, helps you if you are interested in seeing NFL coverage, seeing my reactions, joining in on the conversation. Subscribing, doing all those things helps ensure that you don't miss those videos. Make sure that YouTube gets those videos to you when they are out. But yeah, let's get into my reactions for Week 4. So I'm going to share my screen to you here. We're going to be looking again at ESPN Fantasy. Going to show you how my picks did from the week. So if you watched my predictions video, I showed you this before of how things were looking. This is the updates with Week 4 taken into account now. Had a pretty good week as far as picking winners this week. Didn't do very good against the spread this week, but I'm still well above average when picking against the spread, as it is a bit challenging to do and do well. So let's take a look at what those are looking like. Okay, so to look at specifically how I did this week against the spread, which I have here, and then farther on the left, I've got just straight up picks of teams to win here. We'll go down and I'll give some thoughts on each game as we go. So of course I already did a reaction video to Thursday night, but this was a pretty good one. Really close scoring game, but for the most part the Seahawks controlled the game on the road. I was a bit disappointed in how the Cardinals played, but to be honest, it was a pretty characteristic game for how the Cardinals have played under Kyler Murray, and also in that rivalry, Kyler Murray or Seahawks Cardinals, and specifically in Kyler Murray's career, Seahawks have dominated Kyler Murray, so it wasn't too big of a surprise. Obviously, I picked Seattle to both win and cover the spread here. However, in a lot of sports books, the lines were actually flipped. The Seahawks were favored, and in many places, Seahawks were underdogs of 3.5. So, they did cover that, but this line bounced around a lot. So, this was one that I definitely thought was a possible upset, but at home, Cardinals, let their fans down. Again, it was a close game, but really didn't feel all that close for the most part. So then moving on to the next game, this was our first European international game of the season. This one over in Dublin, Ireland, and it was the Vikings and the Steelers. I was wrong with my predictions on this game. I think most people were, as you can see, at least here on ESPN, the predictions, about 50-50, but the slight majority was with the Vikings winning it. Easy to understand why. Kevin O'Connell, Vikings had a very good record last season. Good expectations on them due to their roster still being very similar. And Carson Wentz having played decently well, of course, against the Bengals, a much worse team than the Steelers, but still, hype on the Steelers, not the greatest either, and they hadn't played the greatest competition as far as opponents previous weeks. So hype wasn't too high on the Steelers going into this, but this one, they played it pretty close, played it pretty close in the end, but for the most part, the Steelers dominated this game. Aaron Rodgers looked really good over there in Ireland. Really good long touchdown throw to DK Metcalf. And so, yeah, it was not exactly what I had predicted, but it was a good score nonetheless. And then Lions, Browns. This one was one that I had predicted the Lions to win in a in a blowout, and sure enough, they did at home. The tendency to maybe bet for the Buccaneers to at least cover the spread would have been because they covered the spread against the Packers. They were underdogs of more than a touchdown, which is a pretty huge number in the NFL. So, it's not uncommon especially for sharp bettors to want to bet that kind of a number. But in this spot where the Browns had just covered a similar spread the week before, and it's the Lions at home on turf, they're going to light people up. And also with the Browns, the previous week when they had covered, it was against the Packers in Cleveland on grass. So, the Browns may be a team that you fade on the road. Maybe you bet the spread with them when they're at home because they do have a good defense. But again, on the road, on turf, against a high-powered offense in the Lions in their home stadium, that's just not going to go well. And so sure enough, Lions took care of business and blew out the Browns, who, Joe Flacco, horrible pick, horrible play, did get benched in garbage time for Taylor Gabriel. Browns just atrocious other than on defense, and, only so much that defense can do in 2025. Next up, this was another game, huge upset. I was very surprised, very impressed with how the Giants did. This was kind of the typical trap game that you might think of as far as an underdog beating a big favorite. But it was a perfect spot for that to happen. You had the Giants at home, desperate for a win. You've got a coach and a front office that are, really needing to win now to save their jobs. And they had just, in the week leading up to this, they benched Russell Wilson after the Week 3 Sunday night game performance. So, bringing in Jackson Dart, there's a lot of unknowns with him in the NFL, being that this was his first start. So, I'm sure that played a bit of a factor as well. Chargers weren't able to get, film on the Giants with Dart. Instead, it was film with Russell Wilson. And, to Dart's credit, and also Cam Skattebo, between the two of them, they looked pretty good. And, it was still a close game. The Chargers did have a chance to actually win this in the end. It was close, but they weren't going to cover this spread of 5.5. But it was still close enough. The Chargers could have won it or at least tied it to go to overtime. It didn't end up working out for them that way, but yeah, for Giants fans, you get your first win at home, first win of the season against a really good team in the Chargers. And, with that, probably the best news of it is that Jackson Dart looked pretty good. Good running, good passing. Again, all that, especially for being in his first start against a relatively good defense and team in the Chargers. Of course, two prominent injuries from this game that are unfortunate, one for each side. The Giants losing Malik Neighbors to an ACL tear, so that's an unfortunate loss for them. They finally get their first win, and he had played good in the game up to that point. But now the Giants lose him for the rest of the season, so that's unfortunate. And then for the Chargers, who are already pretty banged up, in many different spots, which played a factor here. They lost their left tackle to an injury, and he's going to miss a few weeks, Slater. So, he's going to miss an extended amount of time. Shouldn't miss the entire season, so not quite as bad of an injury as it was for Malik Neighbors, but still a long-term injury, two prominent, key, important positions for each team. So Giants do get the win. They do see good signs out of Jackson Dart and Cam Skattebo. Really good power runner, getting some big plays. He looks like a crazy fun player to watch. So I'm excited there for Giants fans. But they got an upset at home and they go to 1-3. Chargers fall to 3-1. And then next game on here, we do have the Commanders hosting the Falcons. This was another game I was wrong on outright. To be honest, this was a game I barely watched. This was pretty much a red zone game for me. The way I've been watching games this year is I do have Sunday Ticket, so I'm watching the multi-view. In there, I usually have red zone, and then I'm watching, on other screens, I'm watching the locally televised games for where I'm at. So I've generally got 5 games up at once plus red zone covering, every single game in there. For Commanders, Falcons, I didn't have much as far as bets on this game. I didn't have much motivation to watch this game with Jaden Daniels out, with the Falcons looking kind of this season so far. So I didn't have much expectations for this game. I did expect the Commanders were gonna win because I think the Commanders are a better team, just slightly. But certainly without Jaden Daniels, obviously wasn't the case. This was at home for the Falcons, so that helps as well. But the Falcons had looked pretty lifeless on offense so far this season. So to get 34 points, some help from the defense this week, but so bit of a surprising outcome for me. But this wasn't a game I had a ton of chips on or a ton of strong beliefs in the outcome. The next game up, Patriots hosting the Panthers. I was correct in picking the Patriots to win. However, I had expected this to be a close game. I had expected the Panthers were going to keep this close. I don't think the Panthers are a good team. And, the Patriots coming into the season, I had expected them to be like a wild card team. So you might be surprised that I picked the Panthers to cover here. But just based off the performance so far this season, it just didn't really feel like the Patriots were quite where I had expected coming into the year. I still don't think that, but obviously Panthers have been one of the worst teams in the league this season. They did get a great win against a rival previous week. So this is kind of a logical trap game for them on the road going into New England. But yeah, just not the... I was not expecting a blowout here, and that is exactly what happened with the Patriots blowing out the Panthers here. Next game up, this is another one. I picked the winner right, but I was wrong against the spread. I had the Eagles winning it, but I thought this was going to be another really close, comeback, win or at least tie by the Buccaneers and Baker Mayfield. Baker, once again, had some great flashes of awesome stuff. Bucky Irving and that running game for the Buccaneers played really well. Baker had a couple mistakes here and there, and Bucs defense just wasn't able to get it done against the Eagles, who, had a, this was one of those wins that's kind of ugly. It was a win nonetheless. It was a decently high-scoring game, but a lot of the talk you're going to hear this week about the Eagles is how, Hurts, not great stats through the air yet again, and Saquon Barkley, not many yards per carry, but again, still that they won. They had a trick play out of a tush-push formation, which got them a touchdown. And then, of course, the big story with this coming out of this game is a tweet put out by A.J. Brown referencing a verse from the Bible, basically inferring the fact that, he's trying to stay quiet, but he doesn't feel like he's being respected or needed where he's at, so he's going to stay quiet and quietly withdraw. Basically, the inferred meaning of that tweet obviously is that he, A.J. Brown's not happy. He's not getting the ball very much, which to an extent, obviously the main reaction from most fans around the league is, usual diva wide receiver, which to some extent I understand that reaction. But to play devil's advocate or at least slightly defend A.J. Brown's position, you do got to think about, yes, he should be, it's fair to say, like, come on, it's a team sport, like, be happy for your team's success. But you do have to remember that there is also the money element of the sport. These are pro athletes. They only, the NFL, one thing that it stands for is not for long, especially for players. You can't take anything for granted in the NFL. One injury could end your career, or at least change what kind of a player you are. And so for a wide receiver of A.J. Brown's caliber, one of the best wide receivers in the league right now, in the middle of his prime, which, a prime years for a wide receiver last from, age 26 to age 30. So that's basically 4 years, basically one contract worth that you have to really be in your prime. And then after that, the contracts that teams are going to get are, teams are going to become more and more reluctant to pay, as you get into the 30s, even if you are doing well. So obviously for receivers, not only do they want to, they want to have production so that they can, for future contracts, they can have better negotiating position. But again, even from a team perspective, from a perspective of just simply wanting to help the team win, a wide receiver is going to feel like they're not able to contribute if they're not getting the ball. If a wide receiver feels confident in their own abilities to help the team win, they're going to feel kind of useless, kind of, like they're not being utilized. So, and again, I get it. The retort to that is, well, you won. Like, stop whining. So that's the thing. Bit of an interesting game, and the narratives swirling around this game already one day after. Eagles are 4-0, one of the few teams that are still undefeated, and yet the talk out of this game is a lot of negatives about the Eagles. And I will say it's a lot of similar stuff to some of the narratives we've heard surrounding the Chiefs in recent years, in the last couple of years, where it was, they're winning every game, but it looks ugly. They're not scoring a ton of points, or they're not lighting it up through the air. But we obviously, as we saw with the Chiefs, they won 2 Super Bowls in a row, went to a third in a row. They've been to however many they've been to in Mahomes' career. So I would say, of course, as far as concern for the Eagles, I wouldn't be too concerned as far as their ability to win. They're going to be in the playoffs. I've still got them picked to end with the best record in the league, tied with the Bills at the moment. I currently see both of those teams going at about 14 wins this season. But yeah, so I mean, Eagles are just fine. They're going to be they're certainly in the Super Bowl bubble. But a lot of the narrative you're going to hear is, what's, concern about, are they going to start losing games because of, the drama with the A.J. Brown stuff? Are they going to start losing games because they can't pass? And again, the thing is, they probably can pass a lot better than they are. It's just a lot of these games they haven't needed to. They're running the ball. They've got the tush push. Just a lot of games and scenarios where they're not really needing to force passes as much. And again, that's not going to make your star wide receivers happy. But, team comes first. You do got to get some win. Whatever you got to do, win it. And the Eagles are doing it here. Another fun fact to do with this game is this is only the 7th time that we've had a game finish with a 31-25 score. The first time that score ever happened was exactly 73 years ago to the day from this past Sunday. So this game was exactly 73 years after the first time this score had happened. And the thing that makes that fact even more funny is that the first time 31-25 ever happened, it also included an Eagles win, that time against the Steelers. So, bit of a random fact that, I at least found kind of fun, because when this score happened, I was kind of like, If you've been watching the channel enough, I'm interested in what is called NFL scoregami. That is basically you can Google it. It'll come up really quickly for you. But NFL scoregami is basically a chart where every single game that has ever been played in NFL history that's counted in the records books, those final scores get charted on a chart of possible win totals that you could have from the winner and from the loser. And so anytime there's a NFL scoregami, that means that it is a final score that has never happened in NFL history. Obviously, being that the league is over 100 years old, there are many different possible scores that have been crossed off the board. But if you go look at that chart, even today, all these years later, there are still plenty of specific scores that that are rare and hard to get to in football. And so anytime I see a weird score like 31-25, I instantly go to that site and go, okay, has this ever happened? And again, this one has happened now 7 times, but that is still a pretty rare score for the NFL at this point. Moving on to the next game, Texans-Titans. This was one I was correct on who the winner was going to be, wrong on the spread. These were 2 winless teams coming into it. Of course, Titans a lot less lifeless, as was shown in this game by the Texans. But the Texans, a lot of concern. They had looked pretty lifeless, especially on offense so far. So, it was at home. But I figured that this game was going to be a pretty close, pretty ugly game. But no, it was a shutout. And the interesting fact for that is for the Texans, this was their first shutout that they have won since 2010. So, 15-year streak there. Obviously a pretty fun one there, I guess, for you if you're the Texans. But a win against the Titans, they are not doing good. So, let's move on. Next game, Bills hosting the Saints. This was one that really huge spread, but nonetheless, I had still picked the Bills to cover this one. Obviously, I shouldn't have big spreads like this generally in the NFL if you want to be, if you want to be a good bettor against the spread for the NFL. Big spreads like this, you don't want to take the favorite necessarily, but in recent years, that trend has kind of gone down. As kind of the margins between good and bad teams has kind of separated a little bit. But this was one of those games where, yet again, the NFL reminded us, like, hey, the worst and the best teams, they'll still keep it relatively close. Now, this ending score, not too far away from the Bills covering the spread. And it was still, the Bills controlled the game for the most part, but there were certainly parts of this game where the Saints kept the score way closer than you might have expected. But nonetheless, it was still at home. The Bills controlled it basically the whole way. The Saints, showed more and more ways to be bad this year. They tried to do a Philly special in the red zone. It ended up being an interception thrown by Chris Olave. So, it was a dominant win for the Bills. Moving on to Rams at hosting the Colts. This was one that I got the pick right, both for the win and for the spread. But obviously, this one was one that if you watch the game, I was sweating this one. This one was looking like the Colts were either going to outright win or at least cover the spread for pretty much the entire game. And if it weren't for a mental mistake by Adonai Mitchell for the Colts that wiped out a touchdown, also a second mistake by Mitchell, because there was one where he caught a long pass and ended up fumbling the ball as he was going into the end zone. So that wipes out a touchdown for him. And then there was a long touchdown run that was called back due to a holding on Mitchell. So 2 key mistakes that, unfortunate for a young receiver. Probably going to get a lot of, hate online and from Colts fans. Which is unfortunate because it's two, yes, very big key mistakes, but some of those mistakes that are, all players have good and bad days, and the thing is some mistakes are lucky in the sense that they don't get noticed, maybe don't get flagged, or maybe they happen on a not so key play and everybody forgets about it 10 minutes later. But then there are some players that are unfortunate to make the bad mistakes in key moments, and those are the moments that unfortunately get remembered for a long time. And so, Mitchell's going to get some hate there, but, there was some good plays, and of course it was the long touchdown pass from Stafford to Atwell at the end of the game that ended up giving them the win and the cover. Surprising to me, but ESPN was saying today that was the longest touchdown pass for Stafford in his career. So pretty crazy, considering all the years that he had with Megatron earlier on in his career with the Lions. The long history he's had with now with the Rams, even with Puka Nacua. So a bit surprising there, but yeah, the Rams covered, won it 27-20, but that's the thing. This is a game where, yes, I did pick the Rams to win and to cover the spread, but I was impressed with how the Rams did here, or with the Colts and how they did here. I've talked about it every week. The previous 3 weeks, I had picked them before the season to lose most of those games, and they've won. They're now sitting at 3-1, and sure, this game, like I predicted, was going to be the Rams establishing, like, hey, we're the better 3-1 team, but this Rams team, they've been to the playoffs more recently. They've got a Super Bowl head coach, so they've got a little bit more Super Bowl playoff pedigree, whereas the Colts have had a lot more struggles in the last decade or so, really since they let go of Andrew Luck, since Andrew Luck retired on him. But yeah, Daniel Jones, I, like many, of course, was a doubter, but and he did have some mistakes in this game that kind of also helped the Colts lose. But Daniel Jones looks still pretty good. I think you got to give credit to the Colts coaching staff. Also, that roster, pretty underrated. So, I do think both of these two teams are going to be alive and real for the playoff race. It's just, as far as a Super Bowl bubble, the Rams are the more Super Bowl ready team. Colts, playoff ready maybe, or at least ready to contend for that going through the season. But, get to playoff time, I would likely predict the Rams to make it farther than the Colts come playoff time. But, we've got a long season ahead for things to change with injuries and teams evolving. So we'll just have to see how the Colts hold out. And I do think they're going to win a ton of games this season. Next game, I was completely wrong on this one. 49ers hosting the Jaguars. I had the 49ers winning this and covering the spread. The reason I had that was Brock Purdy was returning for the 49ers. 49ers still insanely injury prone just across the board. Again, I don't know what it is. The turf, the nutrition, the training staff stuff, who knows? It's tough to, I always feel bad when I hear that kind of stuff mentioned on broadcasts. Because we don't know who the trainers are and stuff. It's hard to place blame on them, but this Niners franchise, they have been really the most injury-prone franchise in the last 5 years. They have dealt with so many high-key injuries each year, many long-term ones, and it's just hard to explain why that's been happening so many years, year in and year out. So, this year, even though you got Brock Purdy back, he didn't look all that great, didn't play that great. Christian McCaffrey, still healthy, played good, had some big runs. But you're still missing Kittle. got some injuries on the offensive line, tons of injuries on the defense, which is already kind of missing players. Also, the 49ers haven't been very good at getting turnovers at all in the last year and a half or so. So it ended up biting them at home against the Jaguars, a team that, Jaguars do go to 3-1 to their credit, but they're, of all the 3-1 teams, they're probably one of the 3-1 teams that I have the least faith in with their current record. But yeah, they won against the 49ers on the road all the way over in the West Coast and beat the 49ers, who dropped to 3-1, and pretty convincingly. Again, it was a close score, and it was a close game, but for most of the game, it was kind of pretty early. I got the feeling of, oh, yeah, my 49ers bets are probably not going to work out today. And that's what ended up happening. So I'm interested to see where these two teams go, but certainly plenty of concern for both. The next game up, probably one of the most watched games of the week, and a crazy blowout. I had both picks for this game correct. The Chiefs at home, short favorites of 2.5. That's just one of those spots that if you followed sports betting at all in the last 2 or 3 years, and really throughout the time that Patrick Mahomes has been in the league, that is a specific spot that you do not bet against the Chiefs. Doesn't really matter who they're playing. And for the Chiefs versus the Ravens, especially, the thing that was getting overlooked by a lot of people, as you'll see here, the majority of the public was on the side of the Ravens for winning and covering the spread, which is fair. Of course, the Ravens have looked better and more explosive in the last year and a half, while the Chiefs, even though they were the one that got to the Super Bowl last year, again, Chiefs have had a lot of offensive struggles, haven't looked that good, including this year. Of course, both teams came into this game 1-2. But the Chiefs also, again, just not looked very good on offense, but they did get Xavier Worthy back, and, that played a big part in this game. The Chiefs finally looked like they had a downfield threat, and that opened up things a bit for the run game, got even Travis Kelce going a bit more. So Chiefs offense, 37 points, one of the highest scoring games they've had in a while, actually, on offense, and certainly one of the best looking games they've had on offense in a while. So, and it did, of course, come against a Ravens team that is massively struggling on defense, one of the worst defenses so far in the league this year. So there is that, but the other thing to this game, and part of why I bet the Chiefs in this one, is the head-to-head rivalry between Patrick Mahomes and Lamar Jackson. In the matchup between those two in their careers, Patrick Mahomes is leading 6-1. So, you could see it in this game, and even the last 3 games, really, that these two teams have played over the last 2 years. When the Ravens play the Chiefs, and especially when it's in Arrowhead, it's just one of those games that's a mental thing, if nothing else, where, the Ravens might look okay against other teams, which they've struggled, actually. Again, they did still come into this game favored. They got into this game, and they looked good in the first drive, got down and scored. But after that, things fell off the tracks. Lamar started playing bad, didn't look great. Derrick Henry couldn't get anything going. Derrick Henry didn't fumble in this game, but instead Lamar did. There was obvious frustration. This was really the second week in a row where I saw a ton of clips of and moments where Lamar Jackson specifically was looking really upset, really annoyed with how things were going. Whatever it was, his own play, the play of the offense, play calling, looking very frustrated and annoyed with how things were going. So, I think this Ravens team, they've got some easier matchups coming up, but again, with the way the defense has been not helping them out, the offense having struggles to do well and to not give the ball away, that kind of thing. They've got some easier games coming up, but I think it's very safe to be concerned about the Ravens. And of course, also Lamar Jackson did also get hurt in this game too. Didn't make it through the full game. Did suffer a hamstring injury. So the initial reporting right now is he's likely going to miss at least week 5. Unfortunately, hamstring injuries are kind of difficult to know. Sometimes hamstring injuries are light and the player might come back 2 weeks later or a week later. Sometimes hamstring injuries keep guys out for 2 months. So, there's a lot of different variants to the severity of a hamstring injury. It's also one of those injuries that, if a player comes back, there's a chance they can re-aggravate it and make it worse. So that's going to be something to monitor going forward for the Ravens. Again, they've got some winnable games, but they certainly looked worse once Lamar went out. And even with him in, they've massively been struggling, and especially that defense is just struggling, has some injuries on it. So, concern for the Ravens. I mean, the Chiefs now sitting at 2-2. They feel all right. They feel alive. Ravens 1-3. The statistics have been out there about, the probability historically of making it to the playoffs after going 1-3. They're not high even since the season got extended to 18 weeks. It's still very low probability. Now, if there's any team that's going to do it, this Ravens team is still one that I believe can do it. And one of the reasons is their division is really weak. You have the Dolphins that just got their first win, the Patriots who just blew out the Panthers, but they haven't looked very good, and then of course the Jets who just lost to the Dolphins and are now 0-4. So you've got a full division outside or that's the Bills. I don't know why I'm going off. That's the easy schedule for the Bills. But for the Ravens, though, still also a pretty easy division. You got the Steelers who, again, the Steelers, they're likely going to be around 500, maybe better. But, then outside of that, you got the Bengals who just got mollywopped by the Broncos, look like they have no life without Joe Burrow. And then you have the Browns who, don't look any better. So, better on defense than the Bengals. But, yeah, Bengals, Browns, they look horrible. Again, Steelers, generally kind of middling, might be better. And certainly being that the Ravens are struggling. And the Ravens have, under Lamar Jackson, have kind of struggled against the Steelers. So that's the thing. The Steelers-Ravens games are going to be very interesting. And I think are going to quite likely decide who makes the playoffs out of the AFC North. I don't think there's going to be a wild card team out of that division this year. It's going to be either the Ravens or the Steelers, likely getting in with a record of 10-9 wins and getting the 4th seed for the AFC North. So maybe the 3rd seed because the AFC South is also pretty weak. But yeah, Steelers-Ravens games coming up later this season, those are going to be really interesting. But yeah, and again, just going to have to wait and see how things go with Lamar and that injury. Moving on, let's talk Bears-Raiders. I would leave it till the end, but we'll talk Bears-Raiders here. This was a crazy back-and-forth game. Very entertaining. I did do also a short reaction last night to yesterday to just a few of the games from Sunday specifically. Did a little bit of talking about this game, but a little bit more of my thoughts on it. Really ugly game from the Bears throughout most of it, honestly. Pretty ugly game by both teams. Obviously, it's I'm not going to deny both these teams are, likely bottom half teams still. The way they've been playing certainly this season. Geno Smith couldn't stop giving away the ball if he wanted to. Threw 3 interceptions, leads the league in interceptions with 7 now. He just horrible interceptions too. That's the thing, is they weren't like passes that were popping out of receivers' hands or anything. It was basically all the interceptions by Geno Smith this week were ones where it just looked like he didn't see the defender there at all. This is a Bears defense that has some injuries, especially in the secondary, has sort of a weak front, a weaker front 7, and certainly front, defensive line, not really the greatest for the Bears. So this Bears team can be run on, and that was really the biggest thing that the Raiders did successfully exploit, that kept them in this game and actually had them with the lead for most of it, is they were actually just able to score touchdowns more consistently than the Bears. And it was when they were running the ball with Ashton Genty. He was lighting up the Bears defense. Honestly, I think if the Raiders had just leaned more on that run game and stuck with it, they'd probably win the game. But they put the ball in Geno Smith's hands too much, and he just could not, he turned the ball over too many times. There was also a fumble too, that was recovered by the Bears. The Raiders defense though was another key thing, kept them in that game. It was really Max Crosby on defense, and really overall, Max Crosby was like the X factor in what kept the Raiders in the game. So many tackles, an interception that was one that he batted up into the air. He also had at least 1 or 2 other passes that he batted up that ended up going incomplete. So he got the 1 interception against Caleb Williams, was pressuring him, chasing him all over the field, really causing some havoc for the Bears. And that's the thing, they were able to get into Raiders territory on pretty much every drive, which to some extent is thanks to the current NFL rules. With the current kickoff and the way the touchbacks and things are working, we're seeing offenses start with much greater field position, and with how good the kicking is in the NFL now, we're seeing it across the league, where teams losing or winning, especially in late game scenarios, as happened with the Bears here, pretty much any team, even the bad teams, if they're close late in the game and you get the ball back off of a kickoff, you can expect your offense to be able to, in garbage time, in 2-minute situation, your offense can get you 20-30 yards and you're already into field goal range. So that was one of the biggest things for the Bears, is they had tons of field goals on this game. Cairo Santos came in clutch. He's gotten some hate from Bears fans, and he's had issues, had some blocked kicks last year, of course, that didn't go the Bears' way, but he made a good amount of kicks. And then there were a couple times the Bears were able to get into the end zone, one including a touchdown pass to Rome Odunze, who he's looked amazing throughout this second year of his career so far. He has at least 1 touchdown in every single game this year, including one of the games where he had 2. So he's up to 5 touchdowns on the season already. He's having a monster year already. I'm loving to see that. Him and Caleb seem to have really good chemistry. And, for the Bears, they still weren't able to get the run game going very well. That's probably one of the biggest things that's hurting the Bears offense, is just not being able to get a run game going. But otherwise, had some good stuff, had some trick plays. They had a trick play that was off of the trick play they did last week, where this time it looked like they were doing a pitch from Swift to Caleb Williams, and then it turned out that Swift was keeping the ball and ran it. That was actually one of the better run plays they had of the night. But it all, in the end, what it came down to was Bears scored a touchdown. Raiders get the ball back with minimal time left to go. And as I mentioned, Raiders get the ball back. Again, even with Geno Smith, who had struggled, a couple plays, they get into field goal range. And at that point, it looked like it was going to be another heartbreaking loss for the Bears. I was pretty upset, pretty down on our luck. I thought this was going to be a Raiders win and cover. I was going to lose my bets on it, and I was going to watch the Bears lose. But again, a rare occurrence for us Bears fans. A block kick happened in a Bears game at the end of the game, and it went in the Bears' favor. So that was super awesome to see as a Bears fan anyways. And also for the Bears, this is their first road win since before the Matt Eberflus era on Sundays. So the Bears were atrocious on the road in general under Matt Eberflus. And really even before, the Bears have been atrocious on the road for years now. They've very much been a better team at home, but not enough. But so yeah, to get a road win finally this early into the Ben Johnson era certainly felt good, even though it was a pretty ugly game. And Ben Johnson obviously was frustrated with how things were going on offense. You've likely, if you watched the game or you've seen anything about it, you've probably seen some of the halftime interview stuff with Ben Johnson. Personally, I didn't mind it. I liked it. First of all, I didn't think he was being that rude to the sideline reporter. To some extent, I thought it seemed like he was almost, a little annoyed, but to some extent, it almost seemed like he was being a little bit sarcastic with her, which again, I get people saying that kind of comes off as rude, but some of the questions she asked, it was, and again, being a sideline reporter would be a tough job. It would be tough to ask, questions that aren't going to annoy coaches, but it was kind of funny. And I do like Ben Johnson. I like his, there's been a lot made of the fact that he's not cracking smiles very often, and he's, got very high expectations, has had many moments of obviously showing frustration on the sideline. But I think that's good. There's been plenty of reporting of him being hard on the team, hard on Caleb. But I think that's what the Bears need. They've needed that for many, many years now. A head coach that could do that. And I think it's working. There have been concerns about the chemistry between Caleb Williams and Ben Johnson, but I think we've seen that's where they're learning each other. Caleb's getting better. The rest of the roster is learning that playbook better. So I think the offense is just going to continue to improve little by little. Of course, part of that depends on how the Bears are able to do in the run game. They did also do some shuffling during the game of the offensive line, which seemed to help the running game ever so slightly. I don't know. I'm not sure that I'm too confident in that being the fix for the run game. I still don't know that the Bears' run game is going to be the best this year that it could be, which is going to hurt the offense to an extent. But again, as that offense develops, which I think it will over the course of the year, and Caleb's going to keep improving, I think the Bears are going to overall improve. And that's the thing. This Bears defense, there's a lot of talk about it being bad, and I mentioned already why, due to injuries and other things, and then the front seven being not the strongest, especially against the run. But this Bears defense, one thing they are doing amazing at, even with, especially considering the injuries they have in the secondary, is this Bears offense has been great at getting turnovers so far this season. Part of that has been good matchups against inexperienced or bad quarterback play, but some of it has just been this Bears defense very obviously being one that is trying to go for turnovers. Which is good because they're not really a very good pressure team up front. Again, not very good at stopping the run. So they're decent they're pretty good against the pass, and pretty prone to getting at least a turnover or an interception in a game, which has really helped in keeping the Bears as in these games as they have been. Last game from Sunday, we had a tie. We had the first tie of the season. Really, I think the first tie we've had in a few years. Actually, I haven't researched that to check it. Fact check me in the comments if you want to. I could be wrong, but I don't think we had a single tie in the 2024 and 2023 seasons. I believe we did have at least one tie in 2022. But yeah, ties are not very common in the NFL, and I can always tell that they're rare in the NFL because I always get more casual fans asking me about that when they happen. I didn't know ties could happen in the NFL, and I always go, yep, they can, and they do, just not very often. But yeah, it was a fun game, at least for me as a fan that's of a totally different team. When I'm watching primetime games, I mostly just want, as long as the Bears aren't involved, I mostly just want an entertaining game. Obviously, for the Packers, as a Bears fan, I'm kind of happy they didn't get the win because it's better off for the Bears in the division. But being that I don't expect the Bears necessarily to be in the playoff race, I wasn't like uber cheering against the Packers in this game. I mostly wanted it to be a good game. And obviously, as you'll see here from my picks, I actually, as far as bets goes, I actually did bet the Packers to win and to cover. I thought this was going to be similar to how things looked, with the Bears playing against the Cowboys last week. If the Bears could do that at home against the Cowboys, I figured the Packers were going to also blow out the Cowboys. But, this was at home in Jerry World, so that obviously helped to an extent, being on turf at home. But, this Packers team, their defense is not, the last couple weeks, not playing totally up to standard, certainly not this week. And then also just that offense for the Packers. Some mistakes, but obviously played well. I mean, it's hard to say with this matchup here. You have a tie. That's why ties are really weird. Again, I kind of like them, especially one like this that was super high scoring. Because we got an entertaining game throughout. It's just ties aren't fun because obviously for each team you'd rather have a win. And Dak Prescott talked about it at the end of the game. Also Jordan Love, they both talked about it. It's just weird when you have a tie. That's the other thing. The post game interviews, they just interviewed both quarterbacks instead of just, normally you could just get interviews with players from the winning team, but it was a tie, so you just interviewed the quarterback from each team, and both quarterbacks pretty much said the same thing of like, well, I mean, we didn't lose, so I mean, but like specifically Dak said like, kind of having a hard time knowing what to feel here. Like we didn't lose, and it was a good game, I guess, and good part of Sundays. That's why we love Sundays, but. It's hard to be too excited about the win. We wish we could have done more, to actually get the win. But so it's tough from, for the team perspective, from an analysis standpoint, it's hard to know how much to criticize one team or give credit to either team. Obviously, major concern still for the Cowboys defense. Cowboys defense is just atrocious. They're going to have to be in shootouts every game to have even a chance to win. And then the Packers, the defense not living up to their expectation. But before this game, the Packers defense has looked pretty good. The Cowboys, to their credit, they do still have a pretty good offense. Dak Prescott's playing pretty good. George Pickens played pretty well. Even the run game was going okay for the Cowboys. But to be missing CeeDee Lamb and win like that was impressive. That was part of why I had expected the Packers to cover this easily, but wasn't the case. We ended in a tie. So as far as the spread, I lost that prediction. Now, because this was a tie for just picking the winner, this actually doesn't count as a loss. This counts as a push. So, again, I'll take it. It's better than a loss. Then moving on to Monday night, really quick. Dolphins hosting the Jets. Dolphins got the win. It was they controlled the game. It was close in the start, but you had a great night from Darren Waller all of a sudden, who got two touchdowns, more touchdowns than he scored in the year that he was with the Giants. Waller's a guy that has had some struggles, had said he was retiring. He was with the Giants for a year, and as I said, that didn't go well. He had been with the Raiders previously where he had done well, had signed a good contract, but didn't stay through all of it because of struggles that he was having on the field and off of it. So it was a good night for him, had those 2 touchdowns. Good night for really most of the Dolphins outside of Tyreek Hill, who had a good night, but did suffer a pretty gruesome looking leg injury and a knee injury that is word is kind of out on exactly the severity of it. But if you watched the game and you saw the clip, it was a pretty gruesome looking way that his leg bent. So it's likely he's going to miss an extended amount of time. So that's unfortunate for the Dolphins and for their fans, but they at least got the win at home. So that'll at least cool the crowd a little bit for the Dolphins and for that staff that is needing wins to keep their jobs. But for the Jets, they fall to 0-4. This is a team that they've got a lot of stuff to build on. A lot of issues. They're in the first year with Aaron Glenn as the head coach, but so far certainly, especially being that he's a defensive head coach, they haven't had the performances that you'd want on defense. But part of that is they just need to build up the defensive roster. But also on offense, you're running with Justin Fields as your quarterback, who, like always, including his time with the Bears, he really is a highlight reel quarterback. At least that's what Colin Cowherd has often called Justin Fields that during his career, and I would say that's not wrong. It might sound harsh, but Justin Fields, he's a very talented player in certain aspects of his game, specifically in the running game, and because of that, he's one of the best running quarterbacks in NFL history. And so because of that, like he did tonight, he'll get some super long rush plays, including a super long rushing touchdown tonight that was off of a 4th down that looked like it should have been a blown up play for multiple yard sack, and he turned it into a touchdown run of 40 plus yards. So it was impressive, a great highlight reel play, and he had many other great highlight reel runs, especially early in the game tonight. But just in the passing game, there were multiple times where you had Garrett Wilson open or other receivers open, and especially as the Jets were trailing throughout the game and by a lot of points at some times in the game, feeling like they had no life. Justin Fields just unfortunately isn't the quarterback for you in that scenario. He just, again, he's a highlight reel quarterback in the sense of, yes, he's super talented, especially at running, but the problem is he doesn't have enough talent and ability in the pass game as far as being able to read the field and get the ball to open receivers in times where it's needed. He just doesn't have enough of that. And so his running ability, yes, it's great, like historically great, but it's just not something that you can rely on reliably enough, play in and play out every drive. You just can't rely on that to win you games. And so the Jets fall to 0-4. They've got a lot of issues to work out. And then final game of the night and of the week. Of course, this was a Monday night doubleheader, so they were kind of overlapping. I'm not a big fan of the Monday night doubleheaders, but this one, Bengals lifeless. I had bet the I had bet the Broncos to win this game, and on ESPN I had selected the Bengals to cover. As far as the spread on this game goes, I wasn't super confident. I didn't place any money on the spread in this game. Mostly just had the Broncos in some money line parlays, that kind of thing. I had some prop bets on this game, but no money on the spread either way. And thankfully I didn't, because again, I thought this might be a close game, being that the Broncos have had some struggles with scoring in recent weeks, and Bo Nix not looking that great. But I mean, this Bengals team, atrocious defense. So that's the thing. I had expected this to be a high-scoring, close game, but it ended up being a low-scoring game with the Bengals just having no life on offense, especially, really from like quarter two, it looked like most of the Bengals had just given up. Very early on, Jamar Chase, T. Higgins, very obviously frustrated. They were shown multiple times on the broadcast, even together on the bench, talking. Very obviously just kind of defeated, like, what do we do? We don't have Joe Burrow. Jake Browning, he came in and played one good game for the Bengals. To be fair to Browning, he is a backup quarterback. And, replacing Joe Burrow, who the Bengals have put a lot on Joe Burrow. Troy Aikman said it on the broadcast. Like, there are very few quarterbacks in the league right now that are being asked to carry as much weight as Joe Burrow is by the Bengals. They just, and to be fair, some of that is due to the Bengals doing what Joe Burrow wanted in the offense or in the offseason. They did a lot of maneuvering of the cap and things like that in order to sign and keep both T. Higgins and Jamar Chase, which is obviously very costly. So they weren't able to do much as far as building up the defense, which has been, just kind of horrible all of Joe Burrow's career. They weren't really able to do much to help with the offensive line, which is part of the reason that Joe Burrow is hurt in the first place now. And Joe Burrow is kind of is a very injury-prone quarterback, unfortunately. Very good, very talented quarterback, but very injury-prone. So, yeah, it's just tough for the Bengals. I feel bad for Bengals fans because you got one of the best quarterbacks in the league, probably one of the best quarterbacks in NFL history, but it's just this franchise just doesn't know how to build around him. They just don't have – I don't think they have the right coach. I think this is the last year for Zach Taylor. And, yeah, they've always had pretty bad defense during Joe Burrow's time, bad offensive line, rarely ever have had any good run game because of it. They always just rely on Joe Burrow and the wide receivers to carry him. And when you have one of those players go out, specifically Joe Burrow, everything just falls apart. And so, yeah, the Broncos, good get-right game at home, fun one for their fans. Bo Nix, Sean Payton, that Broncos defense looked good. Dobbins for the Broncos on the run game. Their other running back, they had, basically a running back by committee. They pretty much, in the run game, the Bengals made the Broncos look like the Lions tonight. So, Dobbins went over 100 yards. It was actually his first week so far this season that he didn't have a touchdown, but still had a ton of yards. Both running backs did. So, it was a good night for the Broncos. Just a lifeless night for the Bengals. They one of those teams that, yeah, they're 2-2, but I see the Bengals going downhill, especially being that you're still going to be missing Joe Burrow for, the most optimistic estimates are that Burrow could be back by very late November, early December, but by that point in the season, you're likely going to be out of it anyways. So, not much hope for the Bengals. And again, especially even if Burrow comes back, and even if you're still alive technically to make it into the playoffs, again, you just got so many holes on this roster. Again, I don't believe you have the right coach. I don't know. You don't have a good front office either, and not good ownership. So it's tough. But yeah, with that, I'm going to wrap up this video. Let me know what you thought down below of this week. Let me know, anything to do with this video. If you've made it this far, thank you. Don't forget to hit subscribe if you want to enjoy more of my football content throughout this season. Soon, later this week, I'll have predictions for Week 5. And I can cover other things. I can cover fantasy. I can cover specific games, players, you name it, and I'll cover it. But again, plan for right now, at the very least, will be a video later this week predicting Week 5. So I appreciate you, and have a great rest of your day.